Xbox is not just your average type of failure. Xbox is the ultimate failure that we have seen in years at this point. Have you got any idea how poorly the Xbox Game Pass is performing? These people unironically expected 100 million people to buy that shit. 100 million! And what did they get? Barely 30. That's right. I know PlayStation's a meme because they're trash, but even they got 50 million PlayStation Plus subscribers, which is very, very sad that so many people buy literal garbage and throw out their money into the wind, but still better than Xbox at the end of the day somehow. And yeah, this kind of explains why Xbox is now fully dipping in the direction of AI and closing down every studio that they can, which is actually a good thing because all of those devs are useless, talentless, and most of them are completely woke. And of course, the irony of Xbox is they're gonna rehire the same woke devs when the time comes. It's really a never-ending cycle of just bad idea after bad idea. No wonder PlayStation won at the end, honestly. Well, I say they won, but at this point they are guaranteeing themselves to be decimated with the no disc, no physical, ignoring players and pumping up prices left and right. Because, listen, do you honestly think PlayStation didn't expect to have more PlayStation Plus subscriptions than 50 million? They probably also had a completely ridiculous goal of like 100 million people on it, or at least 70 million. Less of a failure than Xbox, but still a massive failure at the end of the day.
Headlines surrounding both PlayStation and Xbox have not been positive in the last few days. With Xbox in particular, we have been seeing and witnessing an internal massacre that Ashish Sharma has been spearheading, basically trying to cut cost as much as possible due to, how she puts it, the not healthy state of Xbox. And to that end, she's going to be reducing the Xbox team by approximately 3,200 staff, developers, employees, you name it, throughout fiscal year 2027. And among them will include approximately 1,600 roles eliminated today. Today referring to this date right here, July 6th, 2026.
Still waiting on the Blizzard slaughter.
And as part of all of this, she has highlighted how Compulsion Games and Double Fine Productions will be let go from Xbox and will transition to being fully independent. Ninja Theory and Undead Labs will try to find new ownership. And then beyond that, further reductions were made across Activision, Bethesda and ZeniMax, Blizzard, King, Mojang, and Xbox Game Studios as a whole. And I mean, when you look at figures such as how they've been operating at margins that are 3 to 10 times lower than comparable platforms, when you look at how in a typical year we lost 64 cents for every dollar we invested, yeah, it is true. Xbox as a business is not healthy, though I don't know how getting rid of some heavy hitter studios and not nurturing studios and just kind of letting go of some treasure trove IPs will help with the long
classic communist gobbledygook young, yeah, but the workers are not responsible. Then who is for making this garbage, young? Who is?
term future, when the biggest problem with Xbox has been just a lack of those like smoking gun exclusives, and they are going back to exclusives, so it's a whole situation. And then beyond all that, Arcane is in danger as a studio, with Xbox currently considering their options on what to do with that.
Should have been in danger a long time ago, honestly.
Obsidian recently has been shifted to working on a new Fallout game, but alongside that, they laid off a quarter of its workforce due to Avowed and Outer Worlds 2 not doing particularly well. And then beyond that, you've got situations like id Software being absolutely gutted, with the majority of the team laid off, 136 workers to be exact, which puts them in a situation where they're the size of when they were making Doom 2016. We also saw some layoffs at Bethesda Game Studios itself, specifically their Austin office, which saw 22 layoffs. And then furthermore, even external partners of Xbox like IO Interactive have been impacted by Xbox deciding to end their relationship and partnership with IO Interactive on this Project Fantasy that they've been working on. And so that's resulted in layoffs for IO Interactive. So, yeah, to say that this has been a bad month for Xbox and staff and developers and employees under Xbox and development studios under that umbrella would be an understatement. Now, to really understand how we got here, we have to look at Xbox Game Pass and ultimately Phil Spencer's initial strategy surrounding Xbox of going all multi-platform and making Game Pass the main way to play games, it being kind of the flagship offering on the part of Xbox, not hardware and consoles and exclusives, but the subscription service Xbox Game Pass that is meant to be the Netflix of
Yeah, everyone wanted to be Netflix,
gaming, and
even though Netflix failed.
whose offer is meant to be so enticing, basically a low monthly fee for access to this huge library of games, that people flock towards it in the tens of millions, and that will be the thing that will allow them to make recurrent money. But that is a strategy that ultimately failed, and it failed big time, with recent statistics and data showing what Xbox was trying to achieve in terms of subscription numbers and just how much they failed to achieve those numbers. All of this comes from news outlet Bloomberg with a following headline titled "Behind Xbox's Big Layoffs, a Streaming Strategy That Failed." And so let's scroll down here and look at the most relevant data surrounding all of this, which is that when Xbox launched its Game Pass subscription service in 2017, executives set a goal of reaching 77 million subscribers by fiscal year 2026. They gave themselves about a decade to reach around
Wait, what? It wasn't 100 million? What the hell?
77 million subscribers. Guess what? That deadline of fiscal year 2026 just passed. I mean, that was not too long ago, and we know exactly how many subscribers Game Pass ultimately ended up with. Today, reads Bloomberg's article, the platform has just 30 million subscribers. And today's numbers are actually lower than what they were 2 years ago. Numbers didn't just plateau, it's starting to kind of decrease in trend. So apparently, back in 2024, which was the last time that Xbox shared Game Pass subscription.
By the way, I just want to mention how absolutely insightful these young, specks of knowledge and transcendency are. It didn't. It was supposed to go up, but it didn't, and then it plateaued. Great shit, Young.
Numbers data, they had 4 million subscribers more back in 2024, or as Bloomberg puts it here, today with the platform having just 30 million subscribers, that's 4.
Yeah, well, I mean, of course your subscriber count is gonna go down if, Xbox doesn't have games has been a meme for a decade at this point, and it's true. And it's goddamn very true, in fact. And all of the things that are currently kind of exciting, like the Gears of War, and that shit looks a lot woke. So that's gonna stifle all of these things. The fact that Xbox cannot admit the simple fact that wokeness exists and it massively impacts their decisions to create games and how games end up because of it, because they're not trying to make games, they're trying to make, political statements more or less pretty much always at this point. They're never gonna get out of this situation where Game Pass is a reasonable offering to people. That's just the reality of it.
Million fewer than when the company last publicly shared that data back in 2024. But then in terms of where Xbox Game Pass was supposed to be at from executives' expectations back in.
Also, Young doesn't understand one thing. The last time we had a price hike was when exactly? So that 4 million subscriber loss is because of the price hike that happened not too long ago for the Xbox thing. And since that's just minus 4 million people, that's actually good, because that's losing a little bit more than 13% of your user base, but your price went up more than 13%, which means you are actually gaining from it.
lower than when the company last publicly shared that data back in 2024. But then, in terms of where Xbox Game Pass was supposed to be at from executives,
Also, by the way, one more thing about these Game Pass things. The executives never cared about the 77 million subscriber number. That number is irrelevant. This is probably just a secondary estimation of how many people they needed to be subscribed for for at that point being the actual money that the Game Pass provides. No one calculates this thing in numbers. No one looks at subscriptions. This is a number of money for them. So this is just something that they put out for us.
30 million subscribers, that's 4 million. But then, in terms of where Xbox Game Pass was supposed to be at from executives' expectations back in 2017, we are talking about a service that missed its subscription goal by a whopping 47 million subscribers. We're talking about a service that needed 2.5 times more subscribers than it has right now to meet executives' expectations from back in 2017 to make Game Pass as a service and the kind of putting so many eggs in that basket worthwhile for this company. It missed that margin by such a long shot, it's actually kind of unbelievable. And so what happened? Why did Xbox Game Pass subscription numbers top off like this? Well, one of the biggest detractors from Xbox Game Pass's growth was when they increased prices for Xbox Game Pass Ultimate by a whopping 50% from $20 to $30. At that point, even the most hardcore gaming enthusiasts were like, there's no way I can justify this price point. I might as well, at $30 a month, just buy games outright because at the very least, I'll get to keep them forever. And also at $30 a month, you can buy quite a few AAA games and have, relative ownership over them. Like, when you buy a digital product or physical discs that require day one.
Yeah, this is the thing. You could argue for Game Pass when it was $5, like 3 billion years ago. When cavemen and dinosaurs walked the earth together. But not at $30, not at $15 even. The average person buys like 2 games a year, or whatever the statistic is. 2, 3, maybe 4. If your Game Pass is $15, and though you can buy 2 AAA games, probably that's the max that you're gonna buy from AAA. If your Game Pass is $30 a month, you can buy all of those AAA games that you wanted that year. That is crazy. It is just the worst value you could possibly imagine to a degree.
Downloads, you don't technically own them, but at least they have more longevity than Xbox Game Pass, where games can cycle in and out of its library, and you're fully dependent on being subscribed to have access to those games. And that's worth it when the monthly fee is reasonable enough. But at $30 a month, that was just untenable, and millions of people unsubscribed from Xbox Game Pass after that price increase happened, which is why one of Asha Sharma's first move when she became CEO of Xbox was to bring that price point back down. It's still not quite $20 as it used to be. I think I forget, like $23 or something, but it's certainly better than the alternative of $30 a month. That makes that service far less lucrative and offer far less value for consumers. So yeah, part of the plateau was the aggressive way in which they decided to price Game Pass. But another element is, of course, just the lack of games. There's no smoking gun that Xbox has released that has made people so enticed.
Well, they banked a lot on Starfield.
By the Xbox platform and exclusivity that they felt the need to subscribe to Game Pass at the level that Xbox expected. And part of the gamble was Call of Duty and making that a day one Game Pass.
That was the stupidest gamble ever.
Video game. But unfortunately, when Xbox and Microsoft acquired Activision Blizzard, they were working on a Call of Duty game that would end up being among the least liked Call of Duty games in recent memory, with a campaign featuring supernatural elements that people did not jive with, that just didn't feel like Call of Duty. And even the multiplayer, there were aspects of it that people were just not all that impressed by.
Maybe it's because there was a half crippled girl with the Captain America shield moment. Maybe maybe that has something to do with it. Maybe because it looked like woe garbage.
And so the combination of it not being critically acclaimed and it being one of the least favored Call of Duty games, combined with Xbox Game Pass's pricing no longer being at a level of desirability, with it being $30 a month at that time, it all culminated in Game Pass ultimately being a service that wasn't as
Okay, this is not even the real problem. The real problem with Call of Duty was a stupid idea, Phil. To gain new people to Xbox Game Pass was very simple. Call of Slop is the effective Fortnite of the Zoomer Millennial Gen Xer generation. Every single person who already plays that probably owns a Game Pass subscription. So instead of getting new people who don't own Game Pass, you literally told people who own Game Pass, you don't have to buy this game any longer. So you just lost out on the sales. Again, the demographic that plays Call of Duty and owns Game Pass, they're pretty tight knit together. If it was different, then this would have worked. But it wasn't different.
desired as Microsoft would have hoped, and the subscription numbers plateaued and started to diminish as a result of these combinations of poor decisions on multiple fronts. But then there's one more factor that Microsoft and Xbox did not consider, which is that video games are different from other mediums. Microsoft and Xbox were hoping that Game Pass would be the Netflix of video games, but Netflix is in the business of subscriptions for a library of movies. And you've also got, streaming services for music and the like. But the difference between movies and music versus video games is that those other mediums can be consumed in a much shorter time period, and you can kind of go through a lot of a library featured in those services pretty quickly. Whereas with video games, those experiences are pretty dedicated. And while, of course, there are experiences that only take a dozen hours, there are also plenty of experiences that take multiple dozens of hours or hundreds of hours even. And even a shorter game that's a dozen hours is a longer commitment than a movie that's,
I feel lost. What's the point of this?
2-3 hours long, or music that's a couple minutes long. And so Bloomberg puts
I'm sorry, is Young really fucking just comparing video games to music? That's insane.
it aptly here, the central flaw surrounding Game Pass's model that Microsoft and Xbox did not consider. Quote, while consumers might be willing to pay a monthly fee to Netflix to stream thousands of TV shows and movies, most gamers don't take the same approach, preferring to stick with a handful of favorite games to play on repeat, especially with the dominance of live services and how people dedicate themselves to just a handful of.
Are we really not gonna even mention the fact that the Game Pass library rotates out? That is a massive problem for a lot of people with Game Pass. The fact that the game you played, the game you want to play, can just vanish 1 month. And that completely makes Game Pass useless.
Of live services that they stick to, and that becomes a de facto game that they play, and it's difficult to pull them away from those games to check out a bunch of other experiences. Bloomberg further continues that research from Circana shows that the majority of US gamers buy 2 games at most per year, and a third of the market doesn't even purchase one because they just stick to a handful of live services or free-to-play games that they can invest themselves in. And, they just don't have.
What about the backlog? Everyone has a backlog. I currently have like a 5+ game backlog that I at some point bought for, pennies on the dollar on Steam. And I don't know when I'm even gonna play them at this point.
Time to game like the most hardcore people do, to a level where they can get through a bunch of games in a given year. The inherent length of games across the board, combined with the rise of live services that almost must be treated as part-time to full-time jobs for, gamers who.
Now, I'm not saying this article is bad because it's written by a woman, but I do think that's definitely a part of it.
Engage with those experiences means that there's less bandwidth to try a bunch of games. The whole idea behind making Game Pass the flagship product of Xbox and not consoles was that if subscriptions reach a high enough place, then that recurrent monetization could help fund the business recurrently in a massive way. So
Yes, Young. Thank you for explaining that fucking obvious thing of if you gain enough money through sales, then you can do things because you make money. Thank you. Thank you. I needed that explanation. My caveman brain was not there.
let's do some calculations, right? So at 77 million subscribers, which is the figure that executives wanted to see by right now, which is fiscal year 2026, you multiply 77 million subscribers by $23 a month, and we're looking at revenue that totals $1,771,000,000 a month if they had reached this figure. But instead, with around 30 million subscribers, right now they're making roughly $690 million a month. Missing subscription targets by around 47 million subscribers by fiscal year 2026 means that they've missed their target by a whopping $1,081,000,000 a month. That's a lot of extra money that they're not making on a monthly basis that would have justified the Xbox business as a whole significantly more. If they had reached those subscription numbers, then we might not be seeing the kinds of cuts that are happening right now from a corporate perspective. In fact, Game Pass subscription numbers.
Now, you know what actually is interesting about these numbers? So, what did he say? What's our current thing? It's 30 million, 30 million units, right? 30 times 23 is, we're looking at, how much are we looking at? A couple of billion in a year? Around, let's say around 3 billion in a year. From this report, we know that Xbox is losing 60 cents on everything that they do, which means that this 3 billion is still times a 0.4 profit margin theoretically, I guess. Because keep in mind, revenue is salaries, marketing, everything. Revenue is everything. So from that we deduct everything that that actually costs money for Xbox to do. And since again we know the 64 cents or whatever the hell loss that they had for dollar, that would kind of mean that they theoretically had that 0.34 to 4 times multiplied for actual real profits. And that's kind of a wild one, honestly. I don't know if I believe this one. We're probably still missing a piece of the puzzle because that would still mean that from that 3 billion or whatever the number is, they are still taking home 1.2-ish to 1.6-ish billion. No, 1.6 is too much. Yeah, 1.2-ish billion. Okay, and that's a decent chunk of money. That actually would allow Microsoft to sponsor the new games for the next year. That would actually allow them to do the thing. And if we believe the average cost of a AAA game is fucking 100 million, that means that Microsoft can easily sponsor like 5 big AAA titles a year, which is obviously lies. But even if we're looking at real budgets that are currently roughly 400 million for each of these games, we still have the ability to sponsor up to 5 games easily because these companies are going to make money on their own over time. So you don't need to give them all the money up front. If some company is making a game, you don't, and that game costs 300 million to make, you don't need to give them 100% of the money up front. You just don't. You can give them the first year, like I don't know, like 700 million, and then give it a little bit more depending on what they're doing currently. So Microsoft, still judging from these numbers, would be fiscally capable of actually supplementing Xbox and whatnot, which doesn't make fucking sense considering they're saying they can't. So, That's really awkward. That means that we're missing probably something that we don't really know or understand at this point that Microsoft is doing or Xbox is doing, which makes all of this fiscally unviable. Or, just the number of, oh, for every dollar they're losing 60 cents is just flat out wrong.
Have been so overwhelming in their inability to reach the targets that were set, a decade ago, that the real thing that's been funding the Xbox gaming division and portfolio has really been Minecraft. That is such a profitable game that it alone could.
Yeah, we know this. Or at least I know this, but everyone should expect this. Minecraft's still one of the most selling games in the world.
Fund the rest of the Xbox gaming portfolio, according to the person familiar with Xbox operations. And of course, not to say Game Pass's revenue didn't contribute to that, but it certainly didn't contribute as much as executives were hoping. And all of the profits from Minecraft, instead of being just profits, were instead going back into circulation to fund Xbox. But just the platform and the ecosystem and the product releases and games.
This also doesn't make sense because Microsoft has admitted to subsidizing Xbox. Again, this is like the grand reason why none of this actually does make any sense. It already previously didn't make sense, but the concept of subsidizing means that Microsoft is paying for their existence in the short term of things in this particular instance. That means that Microsoft is giving money to Xbox so it can effectively live. So the 60 cents lost on everything, but the word subsidized being used in the conversation when we're talking about fiscal viability is really strange. But again, interesting stuff. I haven't looked into this too deep because, well, Xbox is a fucking shit show anyway. You don't need me to look into it and actually tell you this because we already know. But something that these people like Young are looking into and telling us is missing a lot of the actual stuff that's happening. Anyway, that was a Young, a year, or what a time to be alive. Look at our little cutesy communist friend. Wasn't he the best? Anyway, have a nice day. Bye.